Welcome to Football Unspoken, the home of unique football takes. How's it, Josh? As it's the end of the season, we thought we'd have a bit of fun and go through our Unspoken Awards. So it's not going to be a typical awards where it's kind of a player of the season. We're going to go through our overhated, the player who's probably been scrutinized a bit too much in the media, underhated, guys who kind of went a little bit under the radar, player, as well as our overhated and underhated teams of the season. Then we'll also go through our unspoken moment of the season. And finally, the big award of the night, the sausage award of the season. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got for me, Josh, but I'll kick us off with my overhated player, Saka. I feel like that's just the obvious one. It's a really obvious one. I feel like it's a really weird thing to say because obviously it feels like he's had such a good season, but there's so many people, and specifically as you're coming up to the Euros, where they're like, is Saka even starting? Like that's a genuine conversation. Is Saka going to start when you've got Cole Palmer, Phil Foden, and like Jude Bellingham and all these players? And I sit there like, Saka's stats are ridiculously good this season, actually. And I think he's got a bit of a, probably from the fans rather than the media, he's got a bit of a bashing for having a pretty poor season by his standards. But I said that, I think he's been really good.
It's amazing to me to hear you put Saka as the most overhated player of the season, because clearly I'm living in some sort of Arsenal bubble, because I haven't heard anyone being like, oh, Saka's had a bad year. I've literally only been exposed to Arsenal. Oh, well, Saka's had a great year, leading the line, another great season. So I'm so surprised to hear that, but it makes me realize that sometimes you might, Instagram and all of those different social networks, they know what you like, so they just keep sending you positive Saka moments only, basically. So that's really interesting. I'm going to say I disagree with you just because I live in a bubble where Saka's only getting positive thoughts. And that's fascinating. Funny enough, I will also say, I can see, though, people debating about who should start on the right, because Palmer and Foden have also had really great seasons. And Foden's come to form, particularly at the end of the season. Like, he's the one probably in the best current form of the three, of Foden, Palmer, Saka.
Yeah, 100%. I do agree with you. But that is interesting. I thought you would have heard a lot more negative Saka content. That makes me very curious as to who your overhated player is going to be.
I can't decide whether you're going to agree with me or not, but I'm going to give the name and then you're going to give your agree or disagree. So my overhated player of the season is Casemiro from United. And this is why. I feel like people are hating on Casemiro going, oh, where is this Real Madrid Champions League CDM? Where is he? I can't see him. He's not playing anymore. And obviously, you can't see him because he's playing in centre-back at 33 or whatever years old in a bang average Man United team. He's not playing at 26 now, actually in position with a Real Madrid team of Luka Modric and players like that around him. He's playing with much worse players out of position, and he's much older. So obviously, you're not going to get the same player. So I think the hatred is kind of unjustified.
When you explain like that, I kind of see where you're coming from. I don't agree with you personally because, I mean, what's happened essentially is you're saying that basically when a player hits 33 years old, they're just dead. They're dead, isn't it? Like they're gone. Because last season he was ridiculous, and I do get what you mean. He's the last couple of games he's not been in his position, but specifically against Newcastle, this bloke decided to play like a beast, and I'm like, no, that's why against Newcastle would he do it? So I do kind of get it. I think he's not hit the levels that you'd expect of a £70 million player. That's the unfortunate fact. But I can see where he might be a bit overhated, especially in the last couple of games. So I'll give you that one. I think we can stick with the overhated teams. I think we'll stick with the overhated and I want to go with the teams. And I've got three choices. To be honest.
Do you want me to go first? Because I've got one choice.
You got one choice. Go for it.
Okay. I think they're going to take you by so surprise. I actually looking at all my options here, and I think all my options are going to take you by surprise. But my overhated team of the season is Spurs. And I know, I thought you wouldn't see that coming.
You're an Arsenal fan, what?
The reason I say Spurs is because they lost Harry Kane this year, one of the best strikers in the world, top 3 strikers in the world. They didn't really replace him in terms of like a prop. They got other players under them and stuff like that around the squad. And Madison in midfield. So I think they improved the squad, not necessarily the striking department. And the fact that they were borderline Champions League, they were still fighting Champions League, I thought was actually really impressive. Where it almost feels like the story around Spurs is how they had such a good start and they faded and they've had almost a bad season by coming fifth. I know for me, I don't know where you had them preseason, but before the season started, I think I predicted them to come around 7th, was where I was thinking, just because they'd lost Kane, new manager coming in, new signings who would maybe need time to adapt. So the fact that they were borderline Champions League, I actually think is quite a good season for them. And that's not me also being a funny Arsenal fan, being like, yeah, Spurs even getting near Champions League is a good result. I'm just saying they lost one of the best players in the world, didn't replace him with quite as good players, more across the squad. So nearly coming Champions League is actually quite good.
I kind of disagree with you, and the reason I say this is because I think if we had done this at the beginning of the season, I would have agreed with you. I think I probably had Spurs in 5th. I do think I still have them in 5th, but those first 10 games were ridiculous. It was so good, and then I think the problem I have with Spurs is that, and it's probably more to do with Ange Postecoglou, is a complete stubbornness to change that defensive line. That defensive line has cost them points throughout the season. Points that would have had them in Champions League pretty easily, I reckon, honestly. Like, easiest one I can think of again, just as a Newcastle fan, it's always Newcastle. But the Newcastle game where we walked over them, even the Chelsea game where Chelsea walked all over them, it was because their defensive line is just in a silly position against teams with real pace in behind. I think that's why I don't agree with that. I think maybe they've been a bit overhated in the fact that, no one expected them to be top, like, contending for the Premier League, but I think their drop-off needs to be acknowledged. So my 3 options, I'm going to go with the first one, which is fairly, I'm going to give you the 2 others and then go with the one that I actually think is genuinely the overhated one. The first option, I've kind of gone with Bournemouth, and I feel like I've probably done this in the wrong way, because they're not overhated, they're just very overlooked. Like, they've had a ridiculously good season for Bournemouth. Like, well, I think they're 10th, 11th, and I think that's where they're going to stay. Like, they're going to finish nearly top 10, and it just seems to be overlooked realistically by a lot of pundits and a lot of content creators. Then the second one, I'm going to go with a bit of recency bias and say Chelsea. Obviously, the money they've spent, they probably should be where they are, but finishing 6th, we spoke about it the other day, but finishing 6th with their start is a ridiculous end to the season. It is. But I'm going to go the main one is, I'm going to go Everton. Everton are the most overhated team this season, and you're nodding, so I think you know where I'm going to go with this. But the fact that they've come back from the points deduction and finished not just like not relegated, but easily clear of relegation is a really, really good effort. And Sean Dyche has got them playing in the same Burnley style that kind of started endearing Burnley to people under Sean Dyche. So I'm interested to see where they go.
Who do you feel like hating on Everton, though? The Premier League or fans? Or who do you feel like hating?
Well, I know for a fact I hate on Everton. Who doesn't want to see Everton get relegated? Honestly, they're being...
Okay, no, that's fair. Okay, I did love to clarify that before my answer. That from that perspective, no, you're right. I've heard and seen a lot of people quite excited to see Everton finally go down because they survived 3 or 4 years by like goal difference every year, basically, under Lampard and managers like that. So I think... yeah, I agree. I think it's not quite fair to hate on a club just because they were dwindling around the relegation and whatever. So I think that's a fair assessment to say that Everton were probably overly hated, and they've certainly overachieved, because if you add the 8-point deduction back, I was looking at this the other day, I think they would be around 10-ish, not 11th, 10th, which is quite ridiculous. On Bournemouth quickly, before we move on, I would, if you'd said Bournemouth, I would have agreed heavily, because I was a big hater on Bournemouth after the way they treated Gary Monk. And that's been such an interesting league table to watch between Bournemouth and Wolves the whole season. I think you'd say they're close enough squads that you could really rate the managers up against each other. And they've pretty much come in almost like this, exactly the same, which has been kind of amusing. Like, Bournemouth are taking this risk and just come out exactly the same. Maybe you could say they're looking long-term, not just a one-season-off thing. But I was certainly hating on Bournemouth, and it's worked out for them.
Yeah, like you said, it's been really interesting to watch Bournemouth, and especially with the rivalry with Wolves, and it's been a fascinating mid-table battle. Who says the Premier League boring? As my response to that. I think we can shift on to the underrated. So underrated players. Or underhated, sorry, not underrated, or underhated players. And now I'm gonna go first here, and my immediate one, and I know you're gonna love this because I've said this multiple times with Garnacho for Man United. I'm sorry, it's because he plays for Man United. If he played for any other team, it's like, yeah, he's young and he's had a good season. Don't get me wrong, he's had a good season, but like, he's not the second coming of Cristiano Ronaldo. He's not had this fantastic season. He's scored one ridiculous overhead goal, and then from there it's gone. He's just the greatest player of all time. So, like, I would rather say, rather than he's underhated, he's just very much overloved. Like, I think that's where I'm going to leave it at.
I can hear something in the distance, and it sounds like a lot of angry Man United fans telling you. But it's hard to disagree with you on that one. I feel bad for Garnacho himself because I actually quite like him as an individual. But I think you're right. When you're in that Man United bubble, you're a young, exciting player coming through. You just get overhyped so quickly, and reality doesn't. You get set up right incorrectly. I mean, look at Lingard. Even Rashford's getting it a bit now. Like, the expectation for him is just so high. If he doesn't get 20 goals a season, which we had a whole episode about how unrealistic that expectation is, but if he doesn't hit 20 goals a season, Rashford's a flop for the season, And I think Garnacho, my concern for him is next year, if he doesn't improve a lot on his performances, then suddenly he's going to be getting all this abuse, which he didn't even ask for, like the rating and etc. So going on to my sort of underhated player, I feel quite strongly about this one, and I've heard no one talk about this at all. My underhated player is Jeremy Doku at Man City, and my reason is he's come in for fairly big money to City this year. City are, going to be top two, if not going to win the league outright for this season. So when you're a winger, and I'll tell you, I've got some stats with me here for this one. When you're a winger for a top two team, I think you would expect to get like between 10 and 15 goals minimum and a couple of assists and stuff, depending how many games you play, obviously. Doku has played in the Premier League this season 28 games. He's scored 3 goals and he's got 7 assists. And I just feel like scoring 1 goal per just under 10 games, like 1 goal per 9 matches or whatever, as a Man City winger, to me, that's just diabolically bad. And for the money that they spent on them, I just haven't heard anyone say that's a bit of a flop. And similar to your Garnacho point, I feel like had Doku gone to Chelsea or United or Spurs this season with the exact same stats, a lot of media would be calling now he's been a flop. But somehow he dodged it, in my opinion.
Now you read that, my initial reaction was like, no, surely not, because he's felt integral to Man City. Just aesthetically, he's felt integral to Man City. But now you read the stats, and but like, to be fair, it's not like he's lit up the league. It's not like he's been, and there has been a lot of positive feedback around Doku. I will say that I've heard a lot of positive stuff this side of the world. So my initial reaction was like, no, you're a bit mad with that one. But here are the stats. We're like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. The fact that he's a bit he's a bit underhated for the fact that like he's gone to Man City, they've won the league, but beyond looking good, and we also had that we had that chat the other day. We were talking about Haaland and Mbappe and how Haaland probably gets a bit unlucky because he doesn't look the player. I think Jeremy Docker is the other side of that, where he looks the player, so he kind of gets away with not having the stats. So I thinking on it, I think you're probably right. It's probably something I agree with.
I love that there was you were like really twisting and turning in your seat there, trying to wrangle your final opinion.
I was struggling a little bit with that final opinion. But I think I'm going to have to be forced to agree with you. Then onto our underhated team. I'm going to go first because I'll go bang straight out the gates. It's just Brighton. Brighton are a massively underhated team for the fact that they were touted to be pushing like fifth, sixth, and be pushing the Champions League positions. Not necessarily getting there, but pushing those Champions League positions. And I think they're going to finish 10th. Roberto De Zerbi's not had them looking very good in the last couple of months. And because they just kind of slipped under everyone's radar. And I'm also going to say I think there's a personal vendetta because the one game they've decided to show up in the last 2 months is against Newcastle. So not happy with that. But yeah.
I think you've made the call of the episode here because it's such a great call that it didn't even occur to me. But I know where Brighton were in 10th, and I remember seeing that and kind of laughing to myself because the amount of praise going to Brighton and De Zerbi about his tactics in the last 12 months, where you look at Aston Villa and Emery, I feel like De Zerbi and Brighton were way more praised when they were up there with Villa than Villa have got currently. So, and the fact that they finished 10 is quite dire, actually. Like, you think of everyone talking about, De Zerbi's brought these new tactics to the league, Guardiola's learning from him. It was all that kind of rubbish. So, yeah, that's a bang of a call, Rob.
I appreciate it. I also appreciate the fact that you weren't thinking it, so it does make it feel like a bit of a better call. I'm very interested to hear who you're under.
Yeah, so the team I think that's been underhated this season is Burnley. And the reason I say that is because they came up from the Championship. They just killed the league. They walked it for a laugh. They're playing all the ticka-taka, and they're going to come up to the Premier League. They're going to show the boys how to play real football now, besides City and Arsenal. And everyone, Everton and those kind of boys have shown Burnley how you play real football. They've just been driven over. So Sheffield, but I almost just felt like because Burnley had won the Championship and they almost came up at such a canter, and it was Vincent Kompany and this new system they were playing, and no one can counter it and all this rubbish. I just think the fact that they, similar to Sheffield, didn't put up a fight really in the relegation battle was just kind of poor. And everyone's just been like, oh yeah, they're newly promoted, so leave them alone. But Luton, in my opinion, value-wise, market value, much smaller squad, less funds available, no manager like Kompany and all of that, put up a much bigger fight, in my opinion. So
I actually think that's a very good shout as well. Like I'm gonna be arrogant and say my shout's better. So
it is better.
I can't give you shout of the episode. But I actually think that's fair enough because a lot was said about Luton. A lot is said about how poor Sheffield were. And I do think that Burnley's, they've not been good. They haven't looked like they weren't going to be relegated since coming up, pretty much. Since the first game of the season, they haven't really looked like they're not going to be relegated. But before the season, there was a lot of conversations around them maybe finishing even as high as 12th or 11th. Being that one championship team, generally in each season, one championship team will come up and they'll kind of throw a spanner in the works.
Exactly.
But Burnley was touted to do that, and they got relegated before Luton, and that's poor. And so I do think that's a very good shout. I do agree with you on that one. This has been the 23-24 Football Unspoken Awards. Please let us know your guys' opinion on it, and from us to you, have a great weekend. See you later. Bye.